The scream that tore from Harriet Lawson's throat when her father struck her across the face echoed through the modest farmhouse outside Lewiston, Idaho territory, and seemed to pierce the very mountains surrounding their homestead on that bitter February morning in 1878. Her mother stood frozen by the cookstove, wooden spoon clutched in trembling fingers, tears streaming down weathered cheeks as she watched her husband raise his hand again. Harriet stumbled backward, one palm pressed protectively against her still flat stomach, the other raised in futile defense. "You have brought shame upon this family," Thomas Lawson bellowed, his face purple with rage and religious conviction. "My own daughter, defiled and carrying a bastard child. I will not have it under my roof." "Papa, please," Harriet sobbed, tasting blood where her lip had split. "I have nowhere to go. It is winter. I will die out there." "Then you should have thought of that before you spread your legs for that snake oil salesman." He spat the words like venom. "What was his name? Oh, that is right. He never even told you his real name, did he? Just sweet-talked you at the harvest dance and disappeared into the night like the devil himself." Harriet's mother, Margaret, finally found her voice. "Thomas, she is our daughter. We cannot just be silent, woman." His tone brooked no argument. "Scripture is clear about adultery and fornication. She has made her bed and now she must lie in it, away from decent, God-fearing people." Harriet's two younger sisters huddled together in the corner, their faces pale with shock. Elizabeth, 16, reached out toward Harriet, but 13-year-old Catherine pulled her back, wise enough at her young age to know that interfering would only make things worse. "I am giving you 1 hour," Thomas said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm that was somehow more terrifying than his shouting. "Pack what you can carry. You are no longer my daughter. You are no longer welcome in this house or on this land. If I see you here after 1 hour, I will have the sheriff remove you as a trespasser." He turned his back on her then, as final as a coffin lid closing. Harriet climbed the ladder to the loft she shared with her sisters with wooden limbs, her whole body numb with shock and terror. This could not be happening. She was 20 years old, had never been more than 15 miles from this farm, and now she was being cast out into the February cold with nothing but the clothes on her back and whatever she could stuff into a carpet bag. Her hands shook as she packed. 2 dresses, a shawl, her mother's old Bible that Margaret had given her on her confirmation, a few pieces of underwear, stockings with darned heels, a hairbrush. She reached under her mattress and pulled out the small cloth bag containing her life savings, earned from selling eggs and butter in town. $17.35. It would not last long. Elizabeth appeared at the top of the ladder, moving quietly. "Harriet," she whispered urgently. "Take this." She pressed a worn wool coat into her sister's hands along with a knitted scarf and mittens. "And this." A small package wrapped in cloth. "It is the bread I was supposed to take to the Hendersons. You need it more." "Lizzie, you will get in trouble," Harriet said, but she clutched the items gratefully. "I do not care." Elizabeth's eyes blazed with an anger their father would have beaten out of her had he heard it. "This is wrong. What he is doing is wrong, and I will never forgive him for it." Catherine appeared next, pressing a small penknife into Harriet's palm. "For protection," she whispered. Their mother did not come upstairs. Harriet understood. Margaret Lawson had learned long ago that defying her husband brought nothing but bruises and broken spirits. But when Harriet descended the ladder for the last time, she found a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth hidden behind her carpet bag. Inside was a tintype of her mother as a young woman, a silver locket that had belonged to her grandmother, and $5 in coins. Harriet slipped them into her bag, not looking at where her mother stood with her back turned, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Thomas stood at the door, pocket watch in hand. Your time is up. Go. Papa, I am sorry. Please, I have no daughter named Harriet. Now get off my property before I fetch my rifle. The door slammed behind her with such force that snow cascaded from the roof. Harriet stood on the porch, carpetbag in one hand, looking out at the endless white landscape. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. Lewiston was 7 miles on foot, down treacherous mountain roads that would be icy and dangerous. She had no choice. Harriet pulled Elizabeth's coat tight around her, wrapped the scarf around her face, and started walking. The wind cut through her layers like knives, and before she had gone half a mile, she could no longer feel her toes inside her worn boots. The road was barely visible, covered in fresh snow from the storm that had passed through the night before. She forced herself to keep moving, knowing that to stop was to die. After what felt like hours but was probably only 90 minutes, she heard the sound of horse hooves and wagon wheels behind her. Hope surged in her chest. Perhaps it was someone who would give her a ride to town. But when she turned, she recognized the wagon. It belonged to the Mitchells, their closest neighbors and regular attendees at her father's church. She raised her hand to wave them down. Mrs. Mitchell looked directly at her, then turned her face away. Her husband did not even slow the horses. They knew. Somehow everyone already knew about her shame. Harriet's legs gave out and she sank into a snowbank at the side of the road, hopelessness washing over her. What was the point? Even if she made it to town, no one would help her. No respectable boarding house would take in an unmarried pregnant woman. She could not get work anywhere once her condition became visible. She would end up in a brothel or dead in an alley. The baby. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. The tiny life growing inside her had done nothing to deserve such a fate. Neither had she, really. She had been foolish and naive, believing the handsome stranger's promises of love, believing him when he said he would return for her after his business in California was concluded. She had given herself to him because she thought they would marry. She had been such a fool, but the baby deserved a chance at life. Harriet forced herself to stand and kept walking. The sun was beginning to set, casting long purple shadows across the snow when she finally stumbled into the outskirts of Lewiston. Her face was numb, her hands and feet burning with cold despite her layers. She had no idea where to go. The main street was busy with evening commerce. Cowboys from the nearby ranches coming into town, miners stopping at the saloons, respectable families finishing their shopping before supper. Harriet kept her head down, not wanting to draw attention to herself, and made her way toward the boarding house where she had sometimes delivered eggs with her mother. Mrs. Winters, the proprietress, answered her knock with a warm smile that immediately faded when she recognized Harriet. "Miss Lawson, what brings you to town so late in the day?" "I need a room," Harriet said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just for a few nights until I can find work and make other arrangements." Mrs. Winter's eyes narrowed, traveling over Harriet's face, no doubt taking in the bruise blooming on her cheek, her disheveled appearance. "I heard some talk today. Your father's hired man was in town this morning, saying your family had cast out their eldest daughter for loose behavior." Harriet's cheeks burned. "Please, I can pay. I have money. I run a respectable establishment. I cannot have a woman of your sort under my roof. It would be bad for business." The door began to close. "Where am I supposed to go?" Harriet's voice broke. Mrs. Winters hesitated, and for a moment, something like pity flickered across her features. "There is a charitable society attached to the Methodist Church. They sometimes help women in difficult situations. Try there." The door clicked shut. Harriet stood on the porch, fighting back tears. She would not cry. Crying would not help anything. She made her way to the Methodist Church, but found it locked, with a sign saying services were held on Sundays and Wednesdays. A man passing by told her the minister lived in the house behind the church, but when she knocked, a severe-looking woman informed her that Reverend Paxton was away on a circuit and would not return for 2 weeks. Night was falling in earnest now, and the temperature was dropping. Harriet's situation was becoming desperate. She saw a small restaurant still open and went inside, using some of her precious coins to buy a bowl of soup and a cup of coffee, more for the warmth and chance to sit down than from hunger, though she knew she needed to eat for the baby's sake. The other customers stared at her, whispering behind their hands. News traveled fast in small towns. When she left the restaurant, full dark had settled over Lewiston. She wandered the streets, trying to think. She passed the saloon and the brothel above it, shuddering at the sound of raucous laughter and piano music. She would not end up there. She would rather die. Maybe she would die. The thought came unbidden. The night was bitter cold and she had nowhere to go. She found herself at the edge of town, near the livery stable. At least it would be warmer there with the horses. She could sleep in the hayloft for one night just to survive until morning. Then she would figure out what to do next. The stable doors were not locked. She slipped inside, breathing in the warm smell of horses and hay. The animals stirred in their stalls, but did not raise an alarm. She climbed the ladder to the loft, burrowed into the hay, and wrapped herself in every piece of clothing she had. It was not comfortable, but it was better than freezing to death in the street. She did not think she would sleep, but exhaustion overtook her, and she drifted into an uneasy doze. She woke to the sound of voices below. Pale morning light filtered through the cracks in the stable walls. "I am telling you, Wayne, this mare will suit you perfectly. She has good lines, steady temperament, and she will not spook at gunfire or cattle." The voice belonged to the stable owner, Jed Hutchins. "I can see that." The second voice was deeper, with a slight southern drawl. "But I am more concerned about endurance. I need a horse that can cover long distances, carry supplies, and not give out on rough terrain. She is perfect for that. Her dam was a Mustang, so she has that wild stamina, but her sire was a thoroughbred, so she has the size and strength you need." Harriet held perfectly still, hoping they would conclude their business and leave before discovering her. She was trespassing, and she had no idea how Mr. Hutchins would react to finding her in his loft. "All right, I will take her," the man with the drawl said. "Can you have her ready by this afternoon? I need to pick up supplies and then head out." "Where are you heading, if you do not mind my asking?" "I have a homestead about 12 miles north of here. Just filed my claim last month. Going to build it up, maybe run some cattle." "You are braver than most, trying to start a ranch alone out there." "I have done harder things." Something in the man's tone suggested he did not want to elaborate. They moved out of the stable, still talking, and Harriet breathed a sigh of relief. She would wait a few minutes, then climb down and slip out. But as she shifted in the hay, her carpetbag tumbled from where she had used it as a pillow, falling through a gap in the loft floor and landing with a thud in the stable below. "What in the world?" Mr. Hutchins' voice. "Footsteps, then. There is someone up in the loft." Harriet's heart pounded. She could try to hide, but there was nowhere to go. They had already heard the bag fall. "Come down from there," Mr. Hutchins called out. "I know you are up there." Slowly, Harriet crawled to the ladder and descended, her legs trembling. When she reached the bottom and turned around, she found herself facing two men. Mr. Hutchins she knew by sight, a portly man in his 50s with a permanently skeptical expression. The other man was younger, maybe 25 or 26, tall and lean with dark hair that needed cutting and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. He wore worn but well-made clothing: denim trousers, a cotton shirt, a leather vest, and a gun belt with a revolver that looked well used but meticulously maintained. His eyes were what caught her attention. They were a startling blue-gray, the color of storm clouds, and they studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away. "Miss Lawson," Mr. Hutchins said, and his voice was not kind. "I had heard you were in some trouble, but I did not expect to find you trespassing in my stable." "I am sorry," Harriet said quickly. "I had nowhere else to go. I was just staying warm for the night. I will leave now. I will not bother you again." "You are Thomas Lawson's daughter," the stranger said. It was not a question. "I was," Harriet replied, lifting her chin. "He has made it clear I am no longer his daughter. Because you are carrying a child out of wedlock." Again, not a question. His eyes had traveled to her hand, which rested protectively on her stomach, a gesture she had not even been aware she was making. Shame burned through her. "Yes." "And the father, gone. He was a stranger passing through. I was foolish and believed his lies. He will not be returning to make things right." Mr. Hutchins snorted. "You have made your bed, girl. Now you must lie in it." "Then I will," Harriet snapped, her fear suddenly transforming into anger. "But I will lie in it alive, Mr. Hutchins, which is why I sought shelter in your stable instead of freezing to death in the street. I am sorry for trespassing, but I am not sorry for trying to survive." The stranger's lips quirked slightly, not quite a smile, but something like approval. "What is your name, Harriet?" "Harriet Lawson." "Miss Lawson, I am Wayne Verner. I am pleased to make your acquaintance, though I wish it were under better circumstances." He spoke with a formality that seemed at odds with his rough appearance. "How far along are you?" The question was so direct and unexpected that Harriet blinked. "About 3 months, I think, maybe a little more." "And you have no family willing to help you? No one at all?" "No one." Her voice cracked slightly. "They have all turned their backs on me." Wayne Verner studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Mr. Hutchins. "Do you have a small wagon I could rent along with that mare? I have a buckboard you could rent or buy." "I will buy it, and I will need a draft horse to pull it." Mr. Hutchins' eyebrows rose. "That is going to cost you." "I have the money." "What are you planning?" Harriet asked, confused. Wayne turned those storm cloud eyes back to her. "I am planning to offer you a proposition, Miss Lawson. I have a homestead 12 miles from here. It is not much right now, just a small cabin I built last fall, but it is solid and it has a good fireplace. I am going to build it up into a working ranch. I need help. Cooking, cleaning, tending a garden when spring comes, preserving food, all the things a homestead needs that I am not particularly good at." Harriet stared at him. "You are offering me work." "I am offering you more than work. I am offering you a home, food, shelter, and protection. In exchange, you would handle the domestic side of running the homestead while I handle the ranch work." "I do not understand. You do not know me. Why would you help me?" Wayne was quiet for a moment, his jaw working as if he was deciding how much to say. "I spent 4 years fighting in the war between the states, Miss Lawson. I saw a lot of death and cruelty. After the war, I drifted for a long time doing various jobs, trying to figure out what kind of man I wanted to be. I decided I wanted to be the kind of man who builds things instead of destroying them. The kind of man who helps instead of hurts. You need help. I can provide it. It is as simple as that." "Nothing is ever that simple," Harriet said, but hope was beginning to bloom in her chest, fragile and terrifying. "You are right," Wayne agreed. "So let me be more direct. You are pregnant and alone. In about 6 months, you will give birth to a child who will need food and shelter and protection. Right now, you have none of those things and no prospects of getting them. I am offering you all of them. In return, I ask only that you help me run my homestead. No other expectations. You would have your own room. Your reputation, such as it is, would remain your own concern. I would not claim to be the child's father or your husband. You would simply be my housekeeper, and your personal business would be your own. People would talk, Harriet said. People are already talking. At least this way, you and your child would be alive and fed. He had a point. There is one other thing, Wayne said, and now his expression shifted, becoming more serious. If you want, I would be willing to claim the child as mine, to give it my name. We could say we married quietly if you wanted that protection for your baby. I would not force you into a real marriage, you understand. It would be in name only, purely for the sake of giving the child legitimacy and protecting you from the worst of the gossip. Harriet could not breathe. Why would you do that? You do not even know me. Every child deserves a chance at a decent life, Wayne said simply. This one will have a hard enough time as it is. I can at least give it a name and a home. You are insane, Mr. Hutchins said flatly, taking on a pregnant woman you just met. Do you have any idea what you are getting yourself into? Probably not, Wayne admitted. But I am doing it anyway. He looked at Harriet. What do you say, Miss Lawson? Will you come work for me? Harriet's mind raced. This was crazy. She did not know this man. He could be a murderer, a thief, or worse. He could be planning to take her to his isolated homestead and do terrible things to her. But when she looked into his eyes, she did not see cruelty or deception. She saw sincerity and perhaps a loneliness that matched her own. And she had no other options. Yes, she heard herself say. Yes, I will come with you. Good. Wayne nodded as if they had just concluded a simple business transaction. Mr. Hutchins, let us settle the bill for the horses and wagon. Miss Lawson, there is a general store 2 doors down. Here. He pulled out a leather wallet and handed her several bills. Go buy yourself whatever you need for the journey and for the next few months. Warmer clothes, personal items, whatever you require. Meet me back here in an hour. Harriet stared at the money in her hand. It was more than she had ever held at one time. I cannot take this. You can and you will. Consider it an advance on your wages. His tone brooked no argument. 1 hour, Miss Lawson. In a daze, Harriet walked to the general store. The proprietor, Mr. Wilkins, gave her a cold look when she entered, but his eyes widened when she began pulling items from the shelves, and his disapproval transformed into mercenary friendliness as he tallied up her purchases. She bought practical things: a warm wool dress, a winter coat of her own since she should return Elizabeth's, sturdy boots, undergarments, a nightgown, soap, a toothbrush and powder, a hairbrush, fabric for making baby clothes, needles and thread, a small sewing kit. Mr. Wilkins helped her carry the packages back to the stable. Wayne had the buckboard loaded with supplies: sacks of flour, beans and cornmeal, crates of canned goods, a side of bacon, coffee, sugar, salt, lard, and more. He had also purchased a milk cow, which was tied to the back of the wagon, looking philosophical about her situation. Ready? Wayne asked. Harriet nodded, not trusting her voice. He helped her up onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. The draft horse, a large, placid gelding, started forward at his command, and they rolled out of town. Harriet looked back once, seeing the small collection of buildings that represented the only world she had ever known. Then she turned her face forward, toward whatever lay ahead. They rode in silence for the first mile. The day was clear and cold, the sky an endless blue. Snow covered the ground, but the road was passable, packed down by previous travelers. Finally, Wayne spoke. I should tell you a bit about myself, since we are going to be living under the same roof. All right. I am 26 years old. I was born in Virginia, fought for the Confederacy during the war, though I never owned slaves and did not believe in the cause. My family died of fever while I was away fighting. After the war, I worked as a ranch hand in Texas for a few years, then signed on with a cattle drive that came up through here. I liked the country, so I decided to stay. Filed a homestead claim on 160 acres of decent land with water access. I am not a drinker. I do not gamble and I do not frequent brothels. I can be short-tempered sometimes, but I have never hit a woman and I never will. I expect honesty and hard work, and in return I will treat you with respect and provide for your needs. Does that seem fair? Yes, Harriet said. Then, feeling she should offer something in return. I am 20 years old. I was born on my father's farm and lived there my whole life until yesterday. I can cook, clean, sow, garden, preserve food, milk cows, tend chickens, and do all the usual domestic work. I have never lived away from my family before. I am frightened and I do not know what I am doing, but I am grateful for your help and I will work hard to earn my keep. That is all I ask. He paused. The man who got you pregnant, do you want to talk about it? No. Fair enough. But if he ever shows up, you let me know. I will handle it. Something in his tone made Harriet believe he would indeed handle it, and efficiently. They rode in companionable silence for a while. The road wound through rolling hills covered in pine and fir trees, their branches heavy with snow. In the distance, mountains rose against the sky, majestic and eternal. It is beautiful here, Harriet said softly. It is, Wayne agreed. I fell in love with this country the moment I saw it. After years of war and destruction, I wanted something clean and new. This land feels like hope. Harriet understood that feeling. She was getting a new start too, even if it was not the one she would have chosen. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat a cold lunch of bread and cheese that Wayne had purchased. He built a small fire to make coffee, and they sat on a fallen log, drinking the hot bitter liquid and warming their hands on the tin cups. "What should I call you?" Harriet asked. "Mr. Verner seems too formal if we are going to be living together, but I do not want to be presumptuous." "Wayne is fine. We are going to be working side by side, no point in standing on ceremony." "Then you should call me Harriet." "All right, Harriet." He studied her for a moment. "Have you thought about what you want to do regarding the baby's name?" "My offer still stands." "I meant what I said about claiming the child as mine." Harriet bit her lip. "Why would you do that? It would tie you to me, to this situation. You would be lying to everyone." "I have done worse things than lie to protect someone who needed protection." His eyes were distant, remembering something. "During the war, I helped 3 slaves escape from a plantation we were camped near. I lied to my commanding officer, told him I had no idea where they went. If he had found out, I could have been shot for treason. But I would do it again in a heartbeat. Some things are more important than the rules." "This is different," Harriet protested, but her heart was warming to him. "Not so different. A child is a child. It deserves a name and a father, even if that father is not blood." "If we did this," Harriet said slowly, "if we told people we were married, we would have to maintain the fiction all the time. We could never tell anyone the truth." "I can keep a secret." "Can you?" Harriet thought about it. The alternative was raising a bastard child, subjecting her son or daughter to a lifetime of shame and limited opportunities. The cruelty of other children, the closed doors, the whispers. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I can keep a secret." "Then let us say we married quietly in Lewiston yesterday, before we left. We will say your family disapproved of me because I am poor and a former Confederate, so we eloped. People will gossip, but they will gossip anyway. At least this way the child will be legitimate." "Are you sure?" Harriet asked, searching his face. "This is a huge commitment. You would be tied to me." "I am already tied to you," Wayne pointed out. "I just offered you a job and a place to live. Adding a fake marriage to the mix does not change much, except it protects the baby." He was right, Harriet realized, and she was deeply grateful, more grateful than she had words to express. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Wayne," he nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "We should get moving. I want to reach the homestead before dark." They traveled through the afternoon, the landscape growing wilder and more remote. Harriet saw deer in the distance, and once, a herd of elk. Hawks circled overhead. The only sounds were the creak of the wagon wheels, the clopping of hooves, and the occasional call of a bird. As the sun began its descent, Wayne pointed ahead. "There, that is home." Harriet followed his gesture and saw a small cabin nestled in a valley between two hills. Smoke rose from the chimney, which puzzled her until Wayne explained. "I have a hand who is looking after the place while I was in town. Young fellow named Danny Carter. He is 17, good worker, planning to file his own claim when he turns 18. He has been staying in the barn and taking care of my stock." As they approached, a gangly young man with red hair emerged from the barn, waving. "Wayne, you are back, Danny." Wayne pulled the wagon to a stop. "I brought help. This is my wife, Harriet. We married in town yesterday." Danny's eyes widened in surprise, but he recovered quickly and swept off his hat. "Madam, pleased to meet you." Wayne never mentioned he was courting anyone. "It was a whirlwind romance," Wayne said smoothly, climbing down from the wagon and reaching up to help Harriet down. His hands were strong and steady on her waist, and he set her gently on the ground. "Well, congratulations to you both," Danny said, grinning. "I will help you unload the wagon." The three of them worked together to carry the supplies into the cabin. Harriet got her first look at her new home in the fading light. It was small, just 2 rooms. A main room with a fireplace, a table with 4 mismatched chairs, some shelves, and a kitchen area with a good cast iron stove, and a smaller bedroom off to the side. The floor was hard packed earth. The furniture was rough but sturdy, clearly handmade. It was clean and neat, though obviously a bachelor's space. "I know it is not much," Wayne said, watching her reaction. "It is wonderful," Harriet said honestly. After spending the night in a stable, the warm, solid cabin seemed like a palace. Wayne looked relieved. "The bedroom is yours. I will sleep out here by the fire. Tomorrow we can start figuring out a better arrangement, maybe build a partition or something to give us both more privacy." They finished unloading as the last light faded from the sky. Danny headed back to the barn, promising to return in the morning to help with chores. Wayne showed Harriet around the cabin, explaining where everything was, how the stove worked, where he kept supplies. "I am not much of a cook," he admitted. "I can make coffee, fry bacon, and not much else. I have been surviving mostly on hardtack, and whatever Danny manages to put together." "I will take over the cooking," Harriet assured him. "Tomorrow I will make a proper breakfast." That night, after a simple supper of beans and cornbread that Harriet managed to put together from Wayne's meager supplies, she retired to the small bedroom. It contained a narrow bed with a corn husk mattress, a small table, and pegs on the wall for hanging clothes. A single window looked out toward the mountains. Harriet unpacked her few belongings, hung up her dresses, and changed into her nightgown. Then she sat on the bed and allowed herself, for the first time since her father had struck her, to cry. But they were not entirely tears of sorrow. Mixed in was relief and gratitude and the first fragile stirrings of hope. She had a roof over her head. She had food. She had protection. And she had met a man who was willing to give her child a name without asking anything in return. It was more than she had dared to hope for 24 hours ago. Wayne lay by the fire, wrapped in blankets, and stared at the ceiling. What had he just done? He had saddled himself with a pregnant woman he did not know, promised to claim another man's child, and committed to maintaining an elaborate lie for the foreseeable future. His friends in Texas would have said he had lost his mind. They would have been right. But when he had seen Harriet standing in that stable, bruised and frightened but still holding her head high, still fighting to survive, something in his chest had twisted. She reminded him of a half-drowned kitten he had pulled from a river when he was a boy, small and helpless but with a fierce will to live. He had not been able to save much during the war. He had watched friends die, had killed men himself, had seen entire towns burn to the ground. He had returned from that hell feeling like his soul was stained beyond redemption. Maybe helping Harriet was a form of penance. Or maybe it was just the right thing to do. Either way, he had made his choice, and Wayne Verner was not a man who went back on his word. He would give Harriet and her child a home. He would be the father her baby needed. And maybe, in the process, he would find a way to forgive himself for all the things he had done during the war. Sleep finally claimed him as the fire burned low. Harriet woke at dawn, which was her habit from years of farm life. She dressed quickly in the cold air, added wood to the fire in the main room, and got the stove going. Wayne was still asleep, bundled in his blankets, his dark hair falling across his forehead. In sleep, he looked younger, less guarded. She quietly gathered ingredients and began making breakfast. Real breakfast, not the pathetic meals Wayne had been surviving on. She fried bacon and eggs, made a pan of biscuits, and cooked up a pot of grits. The smells filled the cabin, warm and comforting. Wayne stirred and sat up, blinking in confusion. "What time is it?" "A little past sunrise. I hope I did not wake you." "No, I should be up." He stood, running a hand through his hair. "Is that bacon I smell?" "Breakfast will be ready in a few minutes." He disappeared outside for a few minutes, and she heard the sound of water splashing. He returned looking more awake, his hair damp, his face freshly washed. When she set the plate in front of him, piled high with food, his expression was almost comically grateful. "You are a miracle worker." "It is just breakfast," Harriet said, but she was pleased. Danny arrived as they were finishing eating, and Harriet made him a plate as well. The young man ate with the enthusiasm of someone who had been living on his own mediocre cooking for too long. "So what is the plan for today?" Danny asked Wayne. "I need to check the fence line on the eastern pasture. A few posts were getting loose before I left for town." "Harriet, do you feel up to taking inventory of supplies and making a list of what we need? I will need to make another trip to town in a few weeks." "Of course." They fell into a routine quickly. Wayne and Danny worked outside, tending the livestock, making repairs, chopping wood. Harriet worked inside, cleaning, cooking, organizing. The cabin was soon transformed from a bachelor's rough shelter into something that felt like a home. She discovered she was good at creating order from chaos. She scrubbed every surface, organized the shelves, made curtains from some fabric she found in one of the supply crates, and began planning a garden for spring. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, and Wayne would tell her stories about his travels, about Texas and the cattle drives, about the places he had seen. Harriet found herself fascinated by his tales of a world so much bigger than her father's farm. She, in turn, told him about her childhood, about her sisters, about the rhythms of farm life. She carefully avoided any mention of the man who had gotten her pregnant. That chapter of her life was closed. Weeks passed. Winter began to loosen its grip on the land. The days grew incrementally longer. Harriet's pregnancy began to show, her dresses growing tight around the middle. Wayne proved to be a man of his word in every respect. He treated her with unfailing courtesy, never intruding on her privacy, never making inappropriate advances. They were housemates and business partners, nothing more. But Harriet found herself growing comfortable around him, even trusting him. He was steady and reliable, qualities she had not known she valued so much until she experienced them. One evening in late March, as they sat by the fire after supper, Wayne said, "I have been thinking. We should probably go to town soon and make our marriage official, just to prevent any legal complications down the road." Harriet looked up from her sewing. "Official?" "The courthouse keeps records. Right now, if anyone checked, there would be no record of a marriage between us. That could cause problems later, especially for the baby. If we actually get married legally, it would solve that issue." "You mean a real marriage?" Harriet's heart began to race. "In name only still," Wayne clarified. "Just legal instead of pretend. It would not change our arrangement. You would still have your own room, your own life. But on paper, you would be Mrs. Verner and the baby would legally be mine." Harriet set down her sewing. "Wayne, are you absolutely sure about this? Once we do this, we would actually be married. You would be bound to me." "I am already bound to you," he pointed out, as he had before. "This just makes it official. But what if you meet someone else? Someone you actually want to marry?" "I am not planning on that," Wayne said quietly. "I have been alone for a long time, Harriet. I have gotten used to it. This arrangement suits me fine." There was something in his voice, a loneliness that matched her own, that made Harriet's heart ache. "All right," she said. "If you are sure, then yes. We will make it legal." They went to Lewiston the following week. The journey was easier now that the weather had warmed, though Harriet was nervous about seeing people from town, about facing their judgment. But with Wayne beside her, tall and solid and protective, she found courage she did not know she had. The courthouse ceremony was brief and perfunctory. A board clerk performed the service. 2 strangers served as witnesses, and within 15 minutes Harriet Lawson became Harriet Verner. Wayne slid a simple gold band onto her finger. She had no ring for him, but he shook his head when she apologized. "I do not need one." They signed the papers, and it was done. As they walked out of the courthouse, Harriet studied the ring on her finger. It felt strange and heavy, a tangible reminder of the life-changing decision she had just made. "Are you all right?" Wayne asked. "Yes," Harriet said, and she realized she meant it. "Yes, I am all right." They stopped at the general store to pick up supplies. Mr. Wilkins greeted Wayne with hearty friendliness, having apparently decided that a paying customer was a paying customer, regardless of scandalous circumstances. As they were loading supplies into the wagon, a woman approached them. She was perhaps 30, with kind eyes and a friendly smile. "Excuse me," she said. "You are Wayne Verner, are you not? I am Emily Richardson. My husband and I have the homestead about 5 miles west of yours." "Madam," Wayne tipped his hat, "this is my wife, Harriet. I heard you had married. How wonderful." Emily turned to Harriet with genuine warmth. "Welcome to the valley. There are not many of us out here, so we homesteaders need to stick together. You must come for supper soon. I would love to have another woman to talk to." Harriet was so surprised by the friendly overture that she could barely stammer out a reply. "That would be lovely." "Wonderful. How about next Sunday? We usually have a rest day on Sundays anyway." They agreed, and Emily bustled off with a wave. Harriet stared after her in wonder. "You see," Wayne said softly, "not everyone is heartless. There are good people in this world." They made the journey home in high spirits. Something had shifted between them, Harriet realized. They were no longer just 2 strangers helping each other out. They were legally bound now, partners in truth. That night, as she lay in bed, Harriet found herself thinking about Wayne in a new way. He was her husband now. In name only, certainly, but still. He was handsome, she could admit that objectively, and kind, and hardworking. And he had saved her life and her baby's life without asking anything in return. She pushed the thoughts away. She could not afford to develop feelings for him. Their arrangement was practical, nothing more. He had been clear about that, but her heart, traitorous thing that it was, did not seem to care about practicality. Spring arrived in earnest, painting the valley in shades of green and gold. Harriet helped Wayne plant a kitchen garden, setting seeds in neat rows, her hands in the warm earth. Her belly was round and prominent now, and she moved more carefully, but she refused to be idle. The baby kicked constantly, strong little thumps against her ribs that made her gasp and laugh. Sometimes Wayne would notice and ask if she was all right, and she would nod, one hand pressed to her stomach. One evening, the baby kicked particularly hard and Harriet winced. Wayne noticed immediately. "Is something wrong?" "No, just a very active baby." She rubbed her side. "Can you feel it?" Wayne asked, sounding fascinated. "The baby moving?" "Oh yes, all the time now, especially when I am trying to sleep." There was a long pause, then Wayne asked hesitantly, "Could I feel it? Just once. I have never felt such a thing." Harriet's breath caught. It seemed like such an intimate thing to let him feel her pregnant belly. But he would be this child's father in every way that mattered. Why should he not experience this? "Yes," she said softly. "Come here." Wayne moved closer, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Harriet took his hand and placed it on her stomach, over where the baby was kicking. They waited for a moment, and then it happened. A strong, unmistakable thump against his palm. Wayne's eyes widened. "That is amazing. There is really a person in there." "A very active person," Harriet agreed, smiling. Wayne kept his hand there for a moment longer, and the baby kicked again, as if showing off. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his usually serious expression into something warm and wondrous. When he pulled his hand away, there was something different in his eyes, something Harriet could not quite identify. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me feel that." "You are going to be this baby's father," Harriet said. "You have every right." They had their supper with the Richardsons the following Sunday, and it was a revelation for Harriet. Emily and her husband Jack were warm and welcoming, treating Harriet like a friend rather than a fallen woman. They had 2 small children, a boy of 3 and a girl of 5, who were shy at first but soon warmed up to Harriet. Over roast chicken and potatoes, Emily asked about the baby when it was due, whether Harriet had everything she needed. "I have some baby clothes my 2 have outgrown," Emily said. "I will bring them by next week. No sense in you sewing everything from scratch when I have perfectly good things just sitting in a trunk." "That is very kind of you," Harriet said, feeling tears prick her eyes. After so much cruelty, kindness felt overwhelming. Jack and Wayne talked about ranching and cattle, discussing the best ways to build up their herds, sharing information about water sources and grazing land. As they drove home in the twilight, Harriet felt happier than she had in months. "They were nice," she said to Wayne. "They are good people. Salt of the earth." Wayne paused, then added, "You see, not everyone will judge you. There are those who understand that life is complicated, that people make mistakes, that grace and mercy matter more than rigid rules. You are one of those people," Harriet said softly. Wayne did not respond, but in the fading light she saw him smile. May arrived, bringing warm days and cool nights. The garden flourished under Harriet's care. She felt huge and awkward now, her ankles swelling, her back aching, the baby pressing on every internal organ. Wayne was endlessly patient and helpful, taking on extra chores so she could rest, bringing her cool water, building her a more comfortable chair with a cushion he stuffed with wool from their small flock of sheep. "You do not have to fuss over me," Harriet protested. "I am not fussing. I am being practical. You are growing my child. The least I can do is make you comfortable, his child." He said it so naturally now, as if he truly believed it, as if the baby really were his. Harriet found herself falling a little bit in love with him every day. It was inconvenient and foolish, and she tried to fight it, but it was like trying to stop the sun from rising. He was just so good, so steady, so kind. He worked from dawn until dusk, building their homestead into something solid and lasting. He never complained. He never raised his voice. He treated her like she was precious. And slowly, she began to believe that maybe she was. One evening in late May, they sat outside on the porch Wayne had built, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. The air was sweet with the scent of wild flowers. "I have been thinking," Wayne said, "about names. For the baby, have you given it any thought?" "A little," Harriet admitted. "If it is a girl, I would like to name her Margaret after my mother, if you do not mind. I think that is a fine name. And if it is a boy," Harriet hesitated. "I do not know. Do you have any preferences?" "Well, if I am to be the father, I suppose I should have some say." He looked thoughtful. "My grandfather's name was Samuel. I always liked that. Samuel Verner, it has a good sound to it." "Samuel Verner," Harriet repeated. "Yes, I like that very much." "Good. Then we are decided. Margaret or Samuel." The intimacy of planning their child's name together made Harriet's heart swell. This was her life now. Wayne was her husband. They were going to raise this child together. It was not the life she had imagined for herself, but it was a good life nonetheless. June arrived, hot and golden. Harriet's due date approached. Emily had given her detailed instructions on what to expect, how to prepare, and had promised to come help when the baby arrived. Wayne became increasingly anxious as the day drew near, checking on Harriet constantly, barely letting her lift a finger. "I am fine," she kept assuring him. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Women have also been dying in childbirth since the beginning of time," Wayne countered grimly. "I am not taking any chances." His fierce protectiveness made her heart ache in the best way. On June 15th, just after dawn, Harriet's water broke. She was in the kitchen, starting breakfast, when she felt the gush of liquid and the first contraction. She gasped and gripped the table. Wayne, who was washing up at the basin, turned immediately. "Harriet, the baby is coming." Wayne went pale, then red, then pale again. "Right now." "Well, not this instant. But yes, today." To his credit, Wayne did not panic. He helped her to the bedroom, got her settled, then ran to saddle his horse. "I am going to fetch Emily," he said. "Danny will stay with you. I will be back as fast as I can." "Wayne." She caught his hand. "It is all right. I am all right." He squeezed her hand tightly. "You are going to be fine. Both of you. You have to be." Then he was gone, and Harriet was left with Danny, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. "You know anything about birthing babies?" Harriet asked him between contractions, which were coming steadily now. "I have helped birth calves and foals," Danny offered weakly. "Well, it is probably similar," Harriet said, trying to sound confident. It was a very long 2 hours before Wayne returned with Emily, who bustled into the bedroom with the authority of a woman who had birthed 2 children of her own. "All right, let us see where we are," Emily said, shooing the men out of the room. "Wayne, boil water. Danny, make yourself useful elsewhere." The labor progressed through the morning and into the afternoon. Harriet had known it would be painful, but the reality exceeded her expectations. Wave after wave of agony crashed over her, and she bit down on a rag to keep from screaming. Emily was wonderful, coaching her through each contraction, wiping her face with a cool cloth, encouraging her through the closed door. Harriet could hear Wayne pacing, his boots thudding on the wooden floor. Every so often he would call out, "Is she all right? Is everything going well?" "Everything is fine," Emily would call back. "These things just take time." As the afternoon wore on and the pain intensified, Harriet began to understand why her mother had always crossed herself when speaking of childbirth. This was brutal and primal, stripping away all pretense of civilization. "I cannot do this," she gasped at one point. "Yes, you can," Emily said firmly. "You are strong. You are doing beautifully. The baby is almost here." And then, just as the sun was beginning to set after one final enormous push that felt like it was splitting her in half, Harriet heard the most beautiful sound in the world, a baby's cry. "It is a boy," Emily announced, holding up the squirming, red-faced infant. "You have a son, Harriet." Harriet collapsed back on the pillows, sobbing with relief and joy and exhaustion. Emily quickly cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Harriet's arms. He was perfect. Tiny and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. Dark hair plastered to his head, eyes screwed shut, little fists waving. "Hello, Samuel," Harriet whispered. "Hello, my son." The door burst open and Wayne rushed in, then stopped short, staring at the baby in Harriet's arms. "Is he all right? Are you all right?" "We are both fine," Harriet said, smiling through her tears. "Come meet your son." Wayne approached slowly, almost reverently. He looked down at the baby and Harriet saw his throat work with emotion. "He is so small," Wayne said quietly. "Would you like to hold him?" Wayne looked terrified at the prospect, but he nodded. Harriet carefully transferred the baby into his arms, showing him how to support the head. Wayne stared down at the infant with an expression of absolute wonder. Samuel opened his eyes and seemed to look directly at him, though Emily had said newborns could not really see yet. "Hello, Samuel," Wayne said softly. "I am your father. I am going to take care of you, I promise." Watching him with the baby, seeing the love and commitment on his face, Harriet felt her heart crack open. This man, this good, kind man, had taken in a desperate stranger and her unborn child, had given them both his name and his protection, and was now standing there holding that child like it was the most precious thing in the world. She was not just a little bit in love with him anymore. She was completely, irrevocably, desperately in love with Wayne Verner. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Emily stayed for 2 days, helping Harriet navigate the challenges of new motherhood, teaching her how to nurse the baby, how to change his diaper, how to swaddle him properly. Wayne hovered anxiously, helping however he could, fetching things, taking Samuel when Harriet needed to rest. On the 3rd day, when Emily finally returned to her own family, Harriet and Wayne found themselves alone with their new son. It was strange and wonderful. They took turns walking Samuel when he cried in the night. Wayne would bring him to Harriet for nursing, then take him back and rock him to sleep, singing softly in a surprisingly good voice. Harriet watched him with Samuel and fell deeper in love, but she said nothing. Their arrangement was clear. He had married her out of kindness, not love. He saw Samuel as a child who needed a father, not as his son by blood. She could not risk ruining what they had by confessing feelings he did not return. Summer passed in a blur of sleepless nights and learning to care for an infant while also maintaining the household. Wayne expanded the cabin, adding another small room so Harriet could have more privacy and so Samuel could eventually have his own space. The garden produced abundantly, and Harriet spent long hours preserving food for the winter, canning vegetables, drying fruits, smoking meat. Wayne and Danny drove a herd of cattle to market in August and returned with money that Wayne immediately invested in improvements to the homestead. More livestock, better equipment, materials to build a proper barn. Life settled into a rhythm. They were a family, even if it was a family built on a foundation of practicality rather than romance. Autumn arrived, painting the aspens gold. Samuel grew, becoming more alert and responsive. He smiled at them, a toothless grin that melted hearts. He babbled and cooed, his little hands reaching for everything. Wayne was besotted. He would spend hours playing with Samuel, making faces, singing songs, carrying him around and showing him the horses and the cattle and explaining everything as if the baby understood. "You are going to spoil him," Harriet teased one evening, watching Wayne bounce Samuel on his knee. "Good, he deserves to be spoiled." Wayne looked up at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You both do." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Then Samuel grabbed Wayne's nose and the spell broke, both of them laughing. Winter came again, their second winter together. The homestead was much more comfortable now, with ample firewood stacked against the cabin wall, shelves full of preserved food, livestock safely housed in the completed barn. They spent long evenings by the fire, Wayne reading aloud from books he had purchased in town, Harriet sewing or mending, Samuel asleep in the cradle Wayne had built with his own hands. It was peaceful, domestic, everything Harriet had never known she wanted. But it was also bittersweet, because she wanted more. She wanted Wayne to look at her with love, not just kindness. She wanted him to kiss her, to hold her, to share her bed as a real husband would. She wanted their marriage to be real in every sense. But he had never given her any indication that he felt that way. He was respectful to a fault, always maintaining a polite distance, never crossing the invisible boundary between them. On Christmas Eve, the Richardsons came for supper, bringing their children and good cheer. They exchanged simple gifts, hand-knitted scarves, a wooden toy horse for Samuel, a fruitcake that Emily had baked. After the Richardsons left, Wayne and Harriet sat by the fire, Samuel drowsing in Harriet's arms. "I have something for you," Wayne said quietly. He pulled a small package from his pocket and handed it to her. Harriet opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. "Oh, Wayne, it is beautiful." "Open it," she did, and found a tiny photograph inside. It was of the three of them, Wayne, Harriet, and Samuel. The traveling photographer who had passed through town in October had taken it. "We are a family," Wayne said, his voice rough with emotion. "I wanted you to have something to commemorate that." Harriet looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Wayne, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. She could not keep it inside anymore. "I love you. I know that was not part of our arrangement. I know you married me out of kindness, not affection, but I cannot help it. I have fallen in love with you, and I needed you to know." Wayne went very still. For a long, terrible moment he said nothing, and Harriet's heart sank. She had ruined everything. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Harriet, I have been in love with you since that day in the stable when you stood there with your chin lifted, refusing to give up even though you had every reason to. I have loved you through every day of the past 2 years. I just thought you could never feel the same way about me. I am just the man who offered you charity when you were desperate." Harriet's tears flowed faster. "You are not just anything. You are everything. You saved me. You saved Samuel. You have given us a home and a life and love, even if you never said the words. I see it in everything you do." Wayne set Samuel gently in his cradle, then returned to Harriet, kneeling before her chair. He took her hands in his. "I love you, Harriet Verner. I love you with everything I am. I have been honored to be your husband and Samuel's father, but if you would have me, I would like to be your husband in truth, in every way." "Yes," Harriet breathed. "Yes, Wayne, yes." He leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle kiss that quickly deepened into something more passionate. Harriet wrapped her arms around his neck, pouring 2 years of longing into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Wayne rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "Court you properly, even though we are already married." Harriet laughed, a joyous sound. "We have been doing things backward from the start. Why stop now?" That night, for the first time, Wayne carried her to the bedroom and made love to her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. It was nothing like the hurried, selfish encounter with the man who had gotten her pregnant. This was beautiful and intimate and right. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Wayne's hand resting on her hip, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I cannot believe this is real," Harriet whispered. "It is real. We are real. This family is real." Wayne pressed a kiss to her hair. "I have never been happier in my life. Neither have I." The years that followed were filled with joy and hard work in equal measure. Wayne's ranch grew and prospered. They added more land, more cattle, hired additional hands. The small cabin was replaced by a larger house with enough room for a growing family, because their family did grow. 2 years after Samuel was born, Harriet gave birth to twin girls, Margaret and Elizabeth, named for her mother and sister. 2 years after that came another son, Jack, named for their good friend. And finally, when Harriet was 30 and Wayne 36, their youngest child was born, a girl they named Emily. Samuel grew into a strong, kind boy who adored his father and helped around the ranch as soon as he was old enough. Wayne never treated him differently than the children who were his by blood. Samuel was his son in every way that mattered. Harriet's younger sisters eventually reached out, writing letters that apologized for abandoning her and expressed desire to reconnect. Elizabeth was married now, to a kind man who was nothing like their father. Catherine was teaching school in a nearby town. Their mother had passed away, and their father had become a bitter, isolated old man whom none of his daughters spoke to anymore. Harriet corresponded with her sisters and eventually invited them to visit. It was strange and emotional to see them again, but also healing. They marveled at her beautiful home, her healthy children, her obviously loving husband. "You did well for yourself," Elizabeth said, watching Wayne play with the children in the yard. "He is a good man." "He is the best man," Harriet agreed. "He saved my life." "He loves you very much. Anyone can see that, and I love him, more than I ever thought possible." On their 10th anniversary, Wayne took Harriet into Lewiston for a rare night away from the children, leaving them in the capable care of Danny, who had married and settled nearby but still helped out on the ranch. They had dinner at the nicest restaurant in town, then walked through the streets as the sun set hand in hand. "You ever regret it?" Wayne asked. "The way we started, all the struggles." Harriet thought about it seriously. "I regret the pain I caused my family, though they caused me pain as well. I regret being so foolish with that traveling man, but I do not regret anything that led me to you. I would go through it all again if it meant ending up here, with you, with our children, with this life we have built." "I feel the same way." Wayne stopped walking and turned to face her. "When I found you in that stable, I was so lonely. I had built a homestead, but not a home. You gave me that. You and the children, you gave me a reason to live, not just survive." "We gave that to each other," Harriet said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "We saved each other." They continued walking, talking about their dreams for the future, making plans for expanding the ranch, discussing what they hoped for their children. When they passed the stable where they had first met, they stopped and looked at it for a long moment. "That day changed my life," Harriet said softly. "Mine too." Wayne squeezed her hand. "Best decision I ever made, offering to help you. Best decision I ever made, accepting your help." They returned to the ranch the next day, to the joyous chaos of 5 children who had missed them terribly. Samuel, now 10 years old and already showing signs of the man he would become, had taken charge in their absence, keeping his younger siblings in line. Wayne ruffled his hair affectionately. "You did a good job, son." Samuel beamed with pride. "I tried to do what you would do, Papa." Harriet watched them together and felt her heart swell with love and gratitude. The years continued to pass. Samuel grew into a fine young man, falling in love with a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch. They married when he was 22, and Wayne deeded him a portion of the land to start his own homestead, while remaining closely involved in the family business. The twins, Margaret and Elizabeth, were as different as two girls could be. Margaret was quiet and studious, eventually becoming a teacher like her Aunt Catherine. Elizabeth was adventurous and bold, learning to ride and rope as well as any cowboy. Jack was the peacemaker of the family, always mediating disputes between his siblings, always finding common ground. Young Emily was the baby, spoiled and loved by everyone. Through it all, Wayne and Harriet's love only deepened. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative. They had built not just a ranch, but a legacy. Their children would grow up knowing they were loved and wanted, never doubting their place in the world. On a warm summer evening, when Harriet was 45 and Wayne 51, they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the mountains. The children were all occupied elsewhere. The older ones married with homes of their own, the younger ones playing in the yard. Wayne's hair was streaked with silver now, and Harriet had lines around her eyes from years of smiling. But when they looked at each other, they saw the young people they had been, desperate and hopeful, taking a chance on each other. "I have been thinking," Wayne said, "about that first day, when I offered to help you. I have never asked you this, but were you afraid? Did you worry about coming with a strange man to an isolated homestead?" Harriet considered the question. "I was terrified, but I was more afraid of dying in the street, and there was something about you, even then. You had kind eyes. I trusted my instinct, and my instinct was right." "I am glad you trusted me. I am glad you took that chance." "I am too." Harriet leaned her head on his shoulder. "You have given me a beautiful life, Wayne Verner." "We gave each other a beautiful life," Wayne corrected, echoing her words from years ago, "and it is not over yet. We still have years ahead of us, years to watch our grandchildren grow, years to continue building this legacy together." "I am looking forward to every single one of those years," Harriet said. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the house, they could hear young Emily practicing her piano scales, the notes occasionally discordant but earnest. In the distance, cattle lowed, and the evening breeze carried the scent of hay and summer wildflowers. It was a good life, built on a foundation that had once seemed impossibly shaky. But they had made it solid through hard work, commitment, and love. Harriet thought about the frightened, pregnant girl she had been, walking through the snow with nowhere to go and no hope in her heart. If she could go back and tell that girl what the future held, she would say, "Hold on. Just hold on a little longer. There is a man waiting who will give you everything, who will love you and your child, who will build you a home and a life beyond your wildest dreams. There is a cowboy in a stable who will say the words that change everything. I will raise this child as mine, and he will mean it. He will love that child and he will love you, and together you will build something beautiful from the ashes of your old life. Hold on. Your story has a happy ending." Wayne squeezed her hand, pulling her from her reverie. "What are you thinking about? How lucky I am, how grateful." "I am the lucky one," Wayne said. "You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to be a better man." "We gave each other those things," Harriet said again, because it was important that he understand it was not one-sided. They had saved each other, As if on cue, Samuel rode up to the house, his wife beside him, both grinning. "We have news," Samuel called out as he dismounted. "What is it?" Harriet asked, though she already suspected. "We are expecting a baby. You are going to be grandparents." Harriet laughed with delight, and Wayne pulled her to her feet so they could go embrace their son and daughter-in-law, celebrating this new life that would continue their legacy. Later that night, after the excitement had died down and they were alone in their bedroom, Wayne held Harriet close. "A grandfather," he mused. "I never imagined this for myself. When I was drifting after the war, I thought I would die alone somewhere, unmourned and forgotten. Instead, you have a wife who adores you, 5 children who love you, and soon, a grandchild. You are anything but forgotten, Wayne Verner. All because of one impulsive decision to help a desperate woman in a stable. All because you are a good man who chose kindness over indifference." "We make a good team," Wayne said, kissing her softly. "The best team," Harriet agreed. They made love that night with the tenderness and familiarity of long-married partners, and afterward, Harriet lay awake for a while, listening to Wayne's breathing deepen into sleep. She thought about the future that stretched ahead of them. More grandchildren, certainly, teaching them to ride, to read, to be kind and brave. Growing old together, their hair turning white, their steps slowing but their love constant. She thought about the past, about the girl she had been and the woman she had become. About the man who had abandoned her and the man who had chosen her. About shame and redemption, about judgment and grace. She had learned so much. That family was not always blood. That love could bloom in the most unexpected places. That sometimes the worst moments of your life could lead to the best. That cowboys in stables sometimes turned out to be heroes who said exactly the right words at exactly the right time. The baby who would soon be her grandchild would grow up hearing stories about the ranch, about the homestead, about the legacy of hard work and love that Wayne and Harriet had built. They would hear about great-grandpa Wayne, the cowboy who took in a desperate woman and her unborn child and raised that child as his own. They would learn that families came in all forms, that love was a choice as much as a feeling, and that second chances were possible for those brave enough to take them. Samuel's child, and all the children who came after, would be living proof that one act of kindness could ripple through generations, changing the course of countless lives. Harriet pressed a kiss to Wayne's shoulder and closed her eyes, smiling. She had been cast out by her family, abandoned and alone, carrying a child she had no way to care for. She had walked through snow and desperation, ready to give up, ready to die. And then a cowboy had said, "I will raise this child as mine." 4 simple words that had changed everything. She drifted off to sleep, dreaming of the future, grateful for the present, at peace with the past. In the morning, she woke to Wayne's kiss and the sound of their children laughing in the kitchen, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, living the life she was meant to live, with the man she was meant to love. It was a beautiful life indeed. A life built on the foundation of one good man's choice to help instead of hurt, to build instead of destroy, to love instead of judge. And it all started in a stable in Lewiston, Idaho, on a cold February day in 1878, when their paths crossed and their destinies intertwined forever. The years continued to unfold with both expected routines and unexpected joys. Wayne and Harriet's ranch became known throughout the territory as one of the most successful and well-run operations. But more than that, it became known as a place of fairness and opportunity. Wayne treated his hired hands well, paying them fairly and providing good living conditions, and word spread. Their children thrived. Samuel and his wife had 3 children of their own, and he proved to be as devoted a father as Wayne had been. Margaret married a lawyer and moved to Boise, where she used her education to advocate for women's rights and better schools. Elizabeth surprised everyone by becoming a veterinarian, one of the first women in Idaho Territory to do so, working primarily with horses and cattle. Jack took over the day-to-day operations of the ranch as Wayne began to slow down, and young Emily showed a talent for business, keeping the accounts and managing sales with a shrewd eye. Wayne and Harriet watched it all with pride. They had created not just a family but a force for good in their community. One autumn afternoon, when Harriet was 52, she received a letter that made her hands shake. It was from her sister Catherine, now a widow with grown children of her own. "Our father has died," the letter said. "He died alone and bitter, having driven everyone away with his cruelty and judgment. I am writing to tell you that you were right to leave, right to build a new life. I am sorry we did not support you when you needed us most. I am sorry it took me so many years to say that." Harriet showed the letter to Wayne that evening. He read it silently, then pulled her into his arms. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Sad," Harriet admitted. Not for him particularly, but for what could have been. If he had chosen love instead of judgment, he could have known his grandchildren. He could have been part of this beautiful life. Instead, he died alone, clinging to his righteousness. "That was his choice," Wayne said gently. "You offered him the chance to be in your life. He refused it. You cannot carry guilt for his decisions." "I know, and I do not really. But it still makes me sad. It makes me sad, too, because he missed out on knowing the most remarkable woman I have ever met." Harriet smiled through her tears and kissed him. After all these years, he still knew exactly what to say. They attended the funeral out of respect for her sisters, making the journey back to the farm where Harriet had grown up. It looked smaller than she remembered, shabby and neglected. The fields were fallow, the house in disrepair. It was clear that Thomas Lawson had spent his final years wallowing in bitterness rather than maintaining what he had. Elizabeth and Catherine were there, along with their families. The reunion was emotional. They had corresponded over the years, but seeing each other in person was different. "Look at you," Elizabeth said, embracing Harriet tightly. "You are so elegant, so confident. I remember the scared girl who left here, and I can barely see her in you now." "That is because I am not that girl anymore," Harriet said. "I have had a good life, a blessed life." At the funeral, the minister gave a sermon about forgiveness and redemption, which seemed ironic given that Thomas Lawson had offered neither to his daughter. But Harriet stood with Wayne's arm around her waist and felt no anger, only pity. After the service, as they were preparing to leave, an elderly woman approached Harriet. It was Mrs. Mitchell, the woman who had refused to give her a ride that terrible day when she was walking to Lewiston. "I need to say something to you," Mrs. Mitchell said, her voice quavering. "I need to apologize. That day when you were walking in the snow, when I turned away instead of helping you, I have never forgiven myself for it. It was cruel and unchristian, and I am ashamed." Harriet looked at the old woman and saw genuine remorse. "I forgive you," she said simply. "I survived. I thrived. And perhaps if you had helped me, I would never have met my husband. Things worked out as they were meant to." Mrs. Mitchell wept with relief, and Harriet hugged her, feeling the last piece of bitterness from those dark days dissolve. On the journey home, Wayne asked, "Are you all right?" "That must have been difficult." It was, but it was also freeing. I realized I do not carry any anger anymore. I have too much to be grateful for to waste energy on bitterness. "You are a better person than most," Wayne said admiringly. "No. I just found the right person to walk through life with. That made all the difference." Their golden years were truly golden. They traveled a bit, visiting their daughter Margaret in Boise, watching Emily open her own business in Lewiston, attending their grandchildren's school plays and graduations. But mostly, they stayed on the ranch, the place they had built together, surrounded by the life they had created. Wayne developed arthritis in his hands, which made ranch work difficult, but he adapted, focusing on training the younger hands, passing down his knowledge. Harriet's hair turned completely white, which Wayne said made her look like an angel. "A very bossy angel," she teased. "The best kind," he replied. They celebrated their 25th anniversary with a party that brought together family and friends from across the territory. Samuel gave a speech that made everyone cry, talking about his father's sacrifice and love, about how Wayne had claimed him as a son when he did not have to, how that had changed his life. "My father taught me that family is not about blood," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is about choice. It is about commitment. It is about showing up every day and choosing love. He chose me before I was even born, and he has chosen me every day since. I can only hope to be half the man he is." Wayne embraced his son tightly, tears running down his weathered face, and Harriet watched them with a heart so full it ached. When Harriet was 61 and Wayne 67, he had a health scare that left him weakened for several months. The doctor said his heart was not as strong as it used to be, and he needed to take things easy. Harriet fussed over him relentlessly, making him rest, preparing special meals, ensuring he took his medicine. Wayne grumbled about being coddled but secretly loved the attention. One evening, as she was helping him to bed, he caught her hand. "If something happens to me, Harriet, I need you to know something." "Nothing is going to happen to you," she said firmly. "Eventually, something will happen to both of us. That is just life. But when it does, I need you to know that these past 33 years have been the best years of my life. You gave me everything I never knew I needed. I love you more than I have words to express." Harriet's eyes filled with tears. "You gave me life, Wayne, literally. I would have died without you. You and our children are the greatest gifts I have ever received." "We gave each other life," Wayne said, echoing their old refrain. "We saved each other." He recovered from that episode, but it was a reminder that their time together would not last forever. They made the most of every day, taking walks around the property, sitting together in the evening, sharing memories and dreams. On their 40th anniversary, the celebration was smaller, just immediate family, but no less meaningful. They renewed their vows in the small church in Lewiston, with all their children and grandchildren present. When the minister asked Wayne to recite his vows, he spoke from the heart rather than from memory. "Harriet, 40 years ago I made you a promise in a courthouse, speaking words I meant but did not fully understand. Today I understand them completely. I have loved you, honored you, and cherished you through health and sickness, prosperity and hardship, joy and sorrow. You have been my partner, my love, my home. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. I choose you today, as I have chosen you every day for 40 years, and as I will choose you for whatever time we have left." There was not a dry eye in the church. Harriet spoke her own vows through tears. "Wayne, you saved me when I was lost. You gave me hope when I had none. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You have been my rock, my shelter, my greatest love. Every day with you has been a gift. I choose you today and always." They sealed their renewed vows with a kiss, and their family erupted in applause and cheers. The party afterward was full of laughter and stories. Their grandchildren performed a play about how their grandparents met, which was both touching and hilarious, with young actors reenacting the scene in the stable, complete with a toy horse and a very dramatic Harriet. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Wayne and Harriet stood together on the porch of their home, watching the sun set one more time. 40 years, Wayne mused. It feels like both a lifetime and a moment. I know exactly what you mean, Harriet agreed. Sometimes I still feel like that frightened girl in the stable. Then I look around at all we have built, and I can hardly believe it is real. It is real. We made it real through sheer determination and love. Samuel approached, his own children trailing behind him. Papa, Mama, we are heading out. Thank you for tonight. It was beautiful. Thank you for being here, Wayne said, embracing his son. For everything. You are my father, Samuel said simply. There is nowhere else I would be. After everyone had left and they were alone, Wayne and Harriet prepared for bed with the comfortable familiarity of decades together. But before they climbed into bed, Wayne took Harriet's hand and led her to the window. Look, he said, pointing out at the moonlit landscape. Look at what we built. Harriet looked. She saw the house they had expanded over the years, the barn that sheltered their livestock, the corrals and fences that marked their property. But more than that, she saw the legacy they had created, children who were kind and successful and good. Grandchildren who were being raised with love and values, a community that was better for their presence. We did good, did we not? Wayne asked softly. We did very good, Harriet confirmed. They stood there for a long moment, hand in hand, looking out at the life they had built from nothing. I love you, Wayne said. I love you too, always. They climbed into bed and Harriet curled against Wayne's side as she had done for 40 years. His arm came around her automatically, pulling her close. Harriet, Wayne's voice was drowsy. Yes. If I could go back to that day in the stable, knowing everything that would come after, I would still make the same choice. I would still offer to help you. I would still claim Samuel as mine. I would still marry you. And I would still say yes, Harriet whispered. Every single time I would say yes. That is good to know, Wayne murmured, already drifting towards sleep. Harriet lay awake a bit longer, listening to his breathing, feeling the warmth of his body next to hers. She thought about the journey they had taken together, from desperate strangers to devoted partners. About the children they had raised and the life they had built. She thought about grace and second chances, about how one act of kindness could change the entire trajectory of a life. How love could heal wounds that seemed unhealable. How family could be chosen as well as born. And she thought about that moment in the stable, 40 years ago, when a cowboy she had never met said 5 words that changed everything. I will raise this child as mine. He had kept that promise. He had raised Samuel with love and dedication, never treating him as anything less than his beloved son. And in doing so, he had given Harriet not just a home and security, but love and purpose and joy beyond measure. She pressed a kiss to his shoulder and whispered into the darkness, "Thank you for everything." Though he was asleep, she liked to think some part of him heard and understood. Wayne Verner lived to be 73 years old, which was a good long life by the standards of the time. His heart finally gave out on a clear spring morning, while he was sitting on the porch watching the sunrise, which was his favorite time of day. Harriet found him there, peaceful and still, a slight smile on his face. The grief was crushing, a pain so intense she thought it might kill her too. But their children gathered around her, and their grandchildren, and she realized she could not fall apart. Wayne had left her a legacy to protect and nurture. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people. Wayne had touched so many lives, helped so many people, been a pillar of their community. Person after person stood up to tell stories about his kindness, his integrity, his willingness to help anyone who needed it. Samuel spoke, of course, telling the story of how Wayne had claimed him before he was even born, how that single act of compassion had shaped his entire life. My father taught me that love is a choice, Samuel said, his voice breaking. He chose to love me and my mother when he had no obligation to do so. He showed me what it means to be a good man. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will honor him by trying to be the kind of man he was. The kind who helps instead of hurts. The kind who builds instead of destroys. The kind who chooses love. They buried Wayne on a hill overlooking the ranch, where he could eternally watch over the land he had loved so much. Harriet stood at the graveside, supported by her children, and said her silent goodbye. "I will see you again," she whispered. "Wait for me." The days after the funeral were hard. The house felt empty without Wayne's presence. Harriet found herself turning to tell him something, only to remember he was gone. She would wake in the night reaching for him, finding only cold sheets. But slowly, she adjusted to her new reality. Her children checked on her constantly, and her grandchildren visited often. She was not alone, even though she was lonely. She lived for another 8 years, watching her great-grandchildren be born, seeing the ranch continue to prosper under Samuel and Jack's management, attending more weddings and celebrations than she could count. She spent her time writing down the family history, wanting future generations to know their story. She wrote about the hard times and the good times, about love and sacrifice and second chances. She wrote about a cowboy in a stable who had saved her life. On her 81st birthday, surrounded by family, she looked around at all the faces descended from her and Wayne and felt overwhelming gratitude. Their love had created all of this. These people existed because a stranger had shown kindness to a desperate woman. "Tell us the story again, great-grandma," one of the youngest great-grandchildren begged. "Tell us how you met great-grandpa Wayne." Harriet smiled and began the tale she had told countless times. "I was young and alone and frightened, carrying a baby and cast out by my family. I had nowhere to go and no hope. But then I met a cowboy named Wayne Verner, and he said the most important words I have ever heard. 'I will raise this child as mine,' and he did, and that changed everything." The children listened with wide eyes, even though they had heard it before. It was a good story, a true story, a love story. Harriet passed away peacefully in her sleep a few months later on a warm June night. Her last thought before drifting away was of Wayne and the life they had shared and the family they had created. They buried her next to Wayne on that hill overlooking the ranch, their graves side by side for eternity. The stone marker read, "Wayne Verner, 1852, 1925, beloved husband and father, he chose love Harriet Lawson Verner, 1858-1939. Beloved wife and mother, she found home the ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations of their descendants." The story of how Wayne and Harriet met became family legend, told and retold, a testament to the power of kindness and second chances. And on clear spring mornings, when the sun rose over the mountains and painted the valley gold, workers on the ranch would sometimes pause and think they could feel the presence of two souls, still together, still watching over the land and the legacy they had built. A legacy that began with 5 simple words: "I will raise this child as mine." Words spoken by a cowboy with a kind heart and a willingness to help. Words that changed everything. The end.